Ymedia Group, the fastest growing media group in North America.
Hello and welcome back to Ymedia Newsroom. I'm Ramona Singh, and the latest headline has now been there's been a growing separatist movement in Alberta. We've heard about this for quite some time, but now it's a little bit significant. So let me retrace what I'm going to talk about, set the stage. Essentially, since 2015, Alberta went through what would have been a recession because of they had, if you recall at the time, they had Rachel Notley, they had, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau getting into office, and all the anti-pipeline sort of legislation that passed, changed things significantly for the economy in Alberta. And then now there's been lots of talks about a separatist movement in Alberta, essentially separating from the rest of Canada. If you recall back in the 90s, that was the case with Quebec. And so now there's a growing separatist movement in Alberta that we've been hearing about, but now there's been major steps taken forward because this organization is now submitting more than 301,000 signatures calling for a referendum on leaving Canada. There's a campaign led by a group called Stay Free Alberta. It's headed by Mitch Sylvester, whose picture you see, and those are all the petitions that are signed, over 300,000 of them. And essentially, you need roughly 178,000 valid signatures, which is about 10% of the voters from the last provincial election to trigger a vote. So they claim that they've exceeded that threshold significantly with 301,000 signatures, which is a massive wide margin. Essentially, the petition efforts ran for those signatures from January till early May of this year. So just now, so just ended in the pictures from yesterday. With these official signatures being delivered to Elections Alberta. Okay, so now this process is, there's a lot more steps. Essentially, there's a court challenge right now led by several First Nations. And they're saying that they're essentially putting a temporary hold on the certification because they're arguing that a separation would violate the treaty rights, right? So if you recall, Indigenous people were here first in Canada before it was Canada. And as Canada United, if you recall, it was Upper Canada and Lower Canada, and so you had the First Nations. Essentially, they've put an argument forward, and now there is a temporary hold. But until the legal review is resolved, the province cannot move forward with verifying the results or calling a referendum. So we know that. If this petition is approved, and the vote would likely take place in Alberta, scheduled in October of 2026. So just across the, just in a few months, less than 6 months, would be a referendum. And this comes after long-standing tensions between Alberta and the federal government over energy policies and economic control and perceived political imbalance. Essentially, Alberta saying that the balance of power is just in Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal, and that the rest of Canada is forgotten about, which is a claim that Albertans have made for a very long time. And we know that Premier Smith of Alberta has said that, if the votes are enough in terms of a petition, then she always promised a referendum. In fact, she was voted. If you recall, Premier Jason Kenney had to step down. She was voted in, and she was always active, saying that if the numbers are there, that she would hold a referendum. We know that lately, as of these past few weeks, we know that the Premier Smith and Prime Minister Mark Carney have been talking about expanding Alberta's production of oil and pipeline, through BC to be able to offer Canadian oil to Pacific Asia. So this comes at a time where, pollings have suggested in the past few years, this year as well as last year, unchanged, that there's generally around 25 to 30% who are, who want to go through this separatist movement from Canada, and it's not essentially a majority yet in Alberta. So this is significant because of the petition, and what it means is it would push for independence of Alberta. And what that means, this is all very new in terms of if the referendum does go through, we'll see what that means in terms of Alberta becoming separating from Canada, which is very significant, and what that means with obviously the trade situation that's taking place. And for a long time, of course, President Trump has always talked about Canadian oil, and we know that he just approved a new pipeline That would increase the output of Canadian oil into America. So, this is signaling a dissatisfaction by, the Albertans who signed that petition because of the federal energy policies, economic controls, and what that economy has had to go through. So now, it does need to have a support, a significant one. So we're of course going to, continue this with you as this progresses. And today was a big news because Prime Minister Mark Carney appointed Louise Arbour as Canada's next Governor General, replacing Mary Simon. This is a very high-profile, internationally respected appointment, signaling, essentially showing there's more focus on legal credibility, human rights, and just the global influence for Louise Arbour. Essentially, she is chosen to be the Governor General, which is, essentially it represents the monarch, right? To advise the Prime Minister, representing the monarch in England. In this case, it's going to be King Charles III. And Mary Simon is the current office holder. She's been there. She was appointed by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in 2021. And it is a very significant role as it represents the Crown in Canada. The Governor General signs legislation, calls elections, performs ceremonial duties. And so if you want to know who is Louise Arbour, well, she's a former Supreme Court of Canada Justice. She's the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. She's the Chief Prosecutor for International War Crimes Tribunal. So very respected individual, and for knowing, well known for her accomplishments and for the high profile career that she's had. It's signaling that Canada wants to have international credibility and influence with her appointment, and because of her strength in legal and constitutional strengths, because obviously, her being a judge and international law and governance, her appointment will be there, will be a 5-year term. And so this is big news for, the Prime Minister's pick for this announcement. Now, when it comes to another big thing, when it comes to Canada in terms of where is it ranking on the global front, well, it turns out that Canada remains one of the top performing countries globally when it comes to higher education and research, with strong universities in terms of quality of education and one of the most educated populations in the world. But where Canada falls short is that it is lower on investment and has weak industry partnerships, which is part of the vulnerabilities that could limit Canada's competitiveness and its future. So essentially, Canada ranks 5 out of 100 countries when it comes to globally in higher education systems. Its strengths are its strong research quality, its high global university rankings, broad systems of quality, not just elite schools, but there's a lot of great schools. And essentially the weaknesses are, in terms of lower public and private investments in the Canadian universities and weaker industry collaborations when it comes to research compared to what you're seeing at other top universities in the world. But when it comes to stats and figures for Canadians, well, essentially education attainment is 64% of Canadians from the ages of 25 to 64 have post-secondary education. And when it comes to global ranking, Canada scores 87.8, so 88% out of 100 of top global countries for when it comes to education. For younger populations, about 67% of Canadians from the ages of 25 to 34 have completed education at a top level globally. And when it comes to research strength, well, Canada scores 100 out of 100 on academic integrity. So when, research is, comes out of, Canadian universities, rarely do you ever second guess it and say, perhaps, maybe there's some inaccuracies. So, but Canada does lag when it comes to, education spending in terms of percentage of GDP. And that is, part of the reason why it has this situation, but when it comes to, other countries like you see in US and in England, that have massive research firms and are collaborative with certain industries when it comes to the sciences and education and other industries. Canada is lacking those strategic partnerships that, of course, it needs to be able to do. So the strategic, takeaway in this is that Canada's model is strong today, but it needs to have increased investment and industry alignment to be able to, keep up its number and scale its research and innovation faster, so it doesn't fall behind with other countries. And major news, the Canadian dollar-backed stablecoin has now been issued by a financial institution that is officially trading on 3 blockchains after receiving approval from Alberta Treasury Board. The token is called CADD. It is the creation of the Calgary-based company Tetra. Essentially, Tetra, which formed last year as a new parent company of Tetra Trust, received backing from Shopify, Wealthsimple, and National Bank to get CADD off the ground. Essentially, it is what they're saying. It's a refresher of the stable coins in this cryptocurrencies designed to be less volatile by being pegged at another store of value. That's why it's been backed by some of those major companies. And in March, Ottawa gave royal assent to legislation regulating domestic private sector stablecoin issuers. So this is something that Canada is stepping into. And so anyone using stablecoins in Canada is almost certainly using one pegged to the US dollar. And stablecoin use grows as cryptocurrency advocates argue that adopting a loonie pegged coin is vital for continued sovereignty against a dominant USD. So that's one of the issues that critics have been raising. But this is new as Stable Corp is working with Deloitte to integrate its Canadian tokens in the financial system. But when it comes to what are the chances that this could be widely accepted? Well, that's to be seen in terms of Canadians' adoption of CADD. When it comes to business news, there's been a shift in this AI race that we're seeing take place for superintelligence, and now AI companies that we know very well, like OpenAI. Well, they're now shifting their moves to selling software. Yes, you're right. Now AI giants are changing their strategy, and what they've decided to do is embed directly into businesses through consulting partnerships with major investment firms. So Anthropic is launching a consulting firm with Goldman Sachs and Blackstone, while OpenAI is building a similar model with partners like TPG and Brookfield's Asset Management. Essentially, what this means, there's a shift in selling AI tools to the average consumer and essentially moving them all to enterprise AI, and partnering with companies that have the clients. So when it comes to Anthropic, well, they are launching a consulting business, would be considered like the McKinsey of AI's model, targeting community banks, mid-sized manufacturers, and essentially firms that are lacking their own AI in-house capabilities. OpenAI is doing the same thing. They're building a competing consulting consortium and essentially partnering with Bain and Company for a strategy layer, and then large private equity firms as a distribution layer to be able to get to those business customers and to be able to push out on when it comes to enterprise AI. Now, these investment firms control hundreds of portfolio companies, and so through a Goldman Sachs or Brookfield Asset Management, they essentially are going to be targeting some of those massive corporations to be able to push AI and not try to, get a monthly subscription from just an average user that is going to be, obviously probably a higher monthly price revenue, but in terms of scalability and in terms of predictability and subscribers, it's a lot lower compared to if they were to go through a more enterprise model for this. So now AI companies are skipping their traditional sales, right? And so now instead of selling licenses one by one, such as to you and me, they're plugging into entire portfolios of companies, right, through Goldman Sachs, to get them there faster, right? Why go after companies one by one when you can go to, the likes of Goldman Sachs and be able to hit their portfolio of companies and be able to distribute your products in AI products. So when it comes to private equity, it's becoming now an AI distribution engine. So it's a very unique way of looking at how to go to market in a very fast way. And firms like Apollo Global Management and Sequoia Capital are pushing AI into their companies because obviously they want to increase efficiency, they say, and valuation. So this AI is now becoming a value creation lever for these massive companies. And consulting is now becoming a real product because most companies don't, fail at AI because of tech. They fail because of implementation, integration strategy. So these are some of the things that these partnerships are looking to solve the gaps to make sure that more companies become, AI ready in this time. So essentially their model of AI monetization has changed from, building this model, selling the APIs because it's enterprise level, and of course, control enterprise transformation and be a part of that massive growth. And, really targeting what would be mid-market companies, huge segments, and, giving them access to, an AI infrastructure. And what they see is that when you do these long-term deals, that it's sticky, it's long-term enterprise relationships. It's not, one-on-one users with the end consumer, such as you and I, that could activate or deactivate. This is more integrated into those corporations. And, AI is, wants to consolidate on when it comes to big tech, big finance, and that is where things are at. Now, yesterday was a really big event for the fashion industry. It was the 2026 Met Gala. And on the red carpet, you saw, all the celebrities that showed up. And essentially, there was one theme that was taking place, even though it was the theme was fashion as art. We had a lot of florals unexpectedly emerge as the dominant on the red carpet. Here you have a picture of the three co-chairs that were part of it. And in the middle there, you have, Mrs. Bezos, who's Jeff Bezos's, wife. Essentially, there was some backlash when it came to the Bezos, becoming co-chairs of this event. So essentially, this backlash, started once when it was announced that, Jeff Bezos and his wife, Lauren Sanchez Bezos, whose picture you saw in the middle there, essentially they were becoming co-chairs and bringing funding. Essentially, it's been estimated that Jeff Bezos made a $20 million donation to this event and the Met Museum. And to that, essentially, and you can show us the pictures of all the different celebrities and their costumes. It's very intriguing as you go through it. So there you had the backlash also have some celebrities step into it. So model Bella Hadid, essentially, who had attended, events in the past. Essentially, she liked social media posts criticizing stars who attended the gala as a move that was essentially saying that that they're supporting Jeff Bezos and what he stands for. So what is this backlash against the Bezos and more specifically Amazon and Jeff Bezos' own companies? Well, essentially the backlash centers around Jeff Bezos' role as a major sponsor and co-chair. And even though it was reported that he gave $10 million upfront for the event and another $10 million to the museum, the criticism came about, what does it mean in terms of having wealth, influence, and all the billionaire culture play in these institutions, right? Several A-list figures such as Zendaya and Meryl Streep actually decided not to attend. Meryl Streep decided not to be a co-chair that was offered to her. They cited scheduling and personal reasons, but essentially it was noticed that they were not there. We know that Meryl Streep just had The Devil Wears Prada 2 come out, so massive film based on the Vogue editor-in-chief. And so for such a massive fashion event, she stepped back and decided not to be the co-chair. And essentially the activists were saying that the Bezos companies have been providing through AWS to ICE. Essentially, the ICE has been, fast moving illegal immigrants from the United States, but we also know that there was a case of 2 American citizens dying during ICE protests and ICE events that took place, which had Christine Nome step down as the head in just previous months. So this is a time where they're saying, by backing Jeff Bezos and his companies who are, funding and integrated with the government, and more specifically when it comes to ICE, to be able to remove illegal immigrants and what's been the backlash of it in the cities that it's been launched in. They were saying that that they don't support it. So even though the controversy stood, it was still fashion's big night, and the Met Gala actually raised the biggest amount of money that it has in ever. It raised over $42 million, and essentially it goes to the costume department of the Met Gala that has to do these fundraisers to be on board. Essentially, the Met Gala goes back, many, many decades, first starting in the 50s, and it was only $50 cost to be able to purchase a ticket. Now, the estimate is about $100,000 per ticket. And even though some of those celebrities don't purchase tickets, what happens is design houses will purchase tables and then will put their costumes on celebrities to attend and be on the red carpet, which is what you're seeing right now in terms of the display. There are, the best dressed, and then there's the worst dressed. But I want to also point out, you can go full screen so you could see these, amazing costumes that you can take, were on the red carpet last night. So the theme was fashion is art. And I think Heidi Klum, I'm not sure if you showed her yet, but she came on as a statue. And if you know Heidi Klum, you know that she's, when it comes to her Halloween costumes, you cannot recognize her because she goes into full animation mode. And so last night was no different, as she showed up as a statue. So as you go through, I can point her out, but what we'll do is definitely play out all of the different the models. I'm not sure, did you show Heidi Klum as a statue? It's in there in the long list, but we can play those out for you, as that's all the time I have for Ymedia Newsroom. I'm Ramona Singh. Until tomorrow, take care and be well.